We're live. What do you know? I hear that beats the alternative, though I guess it depends on what plane of existence you're talking about. Welcome, everybody, to our Monday evening broadcast called Toltec Discussions with Golden Eagle. If you're looking for something else, you found me instead. I'm Golden Eagle. So, I think we'll talk about Toltecs today. Just to be different. As a quick recap for some of you who may be new, and I've heard a rumor there may be some today who are new. The Toltecs are a culture, according to historians, they are a culture from Mesoamerica who did some really cool stuff and then disappeared. According to Toltecs, they are more accurately a subculture, or possibly you could describe them as a caste of individuals within various cultures who held knowledge. You could think of them as a caste of priests who held spiritual knowledge, of scientists and architects, of artists and healers. In other words, they held knowledge. Where the knowledge came from, we might get to later. So for that reason, one of the reasons that they really weren't the whole culture, it's really hard historically to trace who the Toltecs were and where they were and what they did and where they came from. That would be like trying to look at the history of North America based on any modern day religion. Wait, I hear the Baptists were in Alabama. No, I heard Baptists were in California. Wait, are the Baptists the same as the Methodists? I don't know. So that's kind of the problem we have with Toltecs. One of many. What the Toltecs are most famous for is two things. If I have to narrow it down to two, there's two things. One of them is art. Whether it's frescoes or murals or statues or painting on pottery or painting on other spiritual / religious artifacts. It's the artwork that held the Toltec knowledge. And still does, and I will come back to that. The other of the two things the Toltecs were most famous for is their work with consciousness. By today's standards and terminology, you would describe this as spirituality. The goal of Toltec philosophy was this spiritual transcendence or awakening of an entire society. And everything they did in their philosophy was based around that. The interesting thing is, virtually everything I'm telling you is not in any textbook anywhere about the Toltecs. Oh, a few textbooks, I've got a couple over here, talk about, oh yeah, they did some building. Oh yeah, they built this huge, humongous city, but other than that, no. There are a lot of interesting things about these Toltec cities. Like, why is it that the Pyramid of the Sun in Teotihuacan has exactly the same dimensions of its footprint on the ground as the Great Pyramid of Cheops at Giza in Egypt? Less than a meter difference on each side, both of which are aligned to the true north, and they differ in height by a ratio of 1 to 2. The Giza pyramid is taller, exactly twice the height as the Pyramid of the Sun in Teotihuacan. How that could have come about if there wasn't communication and the transfer of people and knowledge between Egypt and Central America is beyond explanation. The only conclusion that can be drawn from that is, yes, there was communication and travel between Egypt and Central America. I'll let you ponder that one for a while. Now, regarding the consciousness work of the Toltecs, the Toltecs do things with consciousness that nobody else does. There are other systems of spiritual philosophy, aka religions in some cases, that do in fact teach a piece that matches what the Toltecs teach. The concept that this world we see as an illusion is taught by many, including the Toltecs. But nobody else teaches the fullness of the philosophy that the Toltecs do. We view consciousness as the means by which we investigate the universe, right? For those who've been following me for a while, you've heard me say that, you know that. And we view that we can upgrade our consciousness, which means we can upgrade the tools we possess within us for how we investigate the universe. In most of my public teachings so far, I haven't really talked about how exactly that gets done. Should I wait for the train? 2 more.
Doesn't really seem to interrupt too much.
You're supposed to do 2 more.
Fell into a black hole.
Long, long, short, long. That's what a train is supposed to do when it comes to a crossing. I only heard 2. Maybe this guy fell asleep. Not a good thing for a train to do at the top of a gorge. Have the engineer fall asleep. Happened once down below us over here. Back in the early 90s. Train derailed, spilled a whole bunch of highly toxic chemicals into the river. Killed thousands and thousands of fish. A lot of people's health was affected a while. Yeah, it was nasty stuff. Anyway, so much for the train that isn't doing it right. So how exactly do we do that, this consciousness upgrade thing? Well, I'm going to talk today about at least 3 categories of what that means to upgrade your consciousness. The first category is using existing abilities that you know you have in ways that are beyond what you think of as normal. An analogy I might make is with your purely physical capabilities and training in something like the martial arts. Everybody who's pretty much alive on the planet knows that there are things and activities one can do called kicking or punching or wrestling, throwing your opponent to the ground, getting kicked and punched and beaten, and those kind of things, right? And the typical schoolyard fist fight over who gets to sit next to the brown-haired pigtailed girl after lunch. Those are the kind of things that third graders and elementary school kids do, right? But then you see somebody like, I don't know, Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan, Chuck Norris, amazing martial artists whose speed and quickness and flexibility and the power they can deliver with kicks and punch and how fast they move their body from point A to point B defies any logical explanation. Martial artists have been tested many, many times, and the conclusion of the official biology medical people testing them is what they are doing is not physically possible for a human body to do.
Yep, they're doing it.
Exactly. They're doing it. So the theory
Ding,
needs
ding, ding,
to be wrong. That is a ding ding. You stole the next sentence right out of my mouth. So give it back. I want it.
I'm Toltec. I got ding ding.
Yeah. That's kind of like the story about the Englishman and the Irishman and the Scotsman who were trying to resolve the differences between their countries. And so they meet at a pub and they're going to sit down and have a pint together and talk about this. And so the waitress brings a pint over for each of them and sets it down, and the Englishman looks at it and says, "Oh, there's a fly in this. Take this back. I can't drink it. Can't possibly drink it." And so then the Irishman kind of, looks at it. There's a fly in mine too. Flicks it out and starts to drink. And then there's the Scotsman. "You guys have flies in your pints?" Looks at his. "I got one too." "Spit it out, you wee bastard. I paid for this pint. I'm not sharing it with the likes of you. Spit it out. Give me back my sentence." So that's the difference between the English, the Irish, and the Scots. And that's why we still don't get along much. We loosely tolerate the Irish as cousins. Kind of those funny cousins, the hillbilly cousins from the wrong side of the tracks. Yeah, they're family, but we don't invite them to dinner every week. The English, on the other hand, we only invite them to activities when it's time for heads on pike season. A sport invented by the Scots. So, yes, exactly. What was it you said?
Yep, they do it. That's what I said.
Yeah, martial artists do it. They do things that, according to the experts, are physically impossible. And they do it with an extremely rigorous work ethic. They train every day. They train in flexibility. They train in strength. They train in endurance. And the target of their training is what? This is a question.
To be the best they can.
No.
I would say mental consciousness and
Ding, ding, ding. Yeah.
concentration.
The physical body is used as the tool to train the mind and consciousness. Martial artists do what we do, not because we've put our physical body through the training, or let me just say that, the body goes through the training with the mind, but the target of the training is not the body. The target is the effect on the consciousness and the mind that training the physical body has. It's an intermediate step. In the world of yoga in India, a lot of the Hindu yogis train their consciousness the same way. Yogis have been recorded as doing things that are physically impossible according to the so-called experts. Now keep in mind that these experts are not to be taken lightly. They're important people. They're the ones who have done all the analysis to prove that bumblebees cannot fly.
Mm-hmm.
They've weighed the bumblebee, they looked at the wings, how fast they beat, and their conclusion is it is impossible for bumblebees to fly. This is the kind of experts we have in the world of biology. Only a funny thing happened on the way to the forum. The biology experts forgot to tell the bumblebees. So they've been happily flying around for eons, eating their pollen, pollinating plants, raising their young, flying most of the time, and they didn't know they weren't supposed to be able to fly, right? So finally, a couple of years ago, I saw somebody's analysis that figured out why bumblebees can fly. It's because they're using something that normally aerodynamics tries to avoid, which is turbulence. Turbulence is a bad thing in the world of aerodynamics if you're looking for smooth laminar flow over an airfoil-shaped wing to produce a difference in pressure between the top and bottom, what we would call in the aircraft industry lift. Only that's not how bumblebees produce lift. They produce lift by creating turbulence, which is creating a vortex above them, and the vortex then sucks them up.
Almost like a helicopter.
In a way, except the helicopter is different in that it still has an airfoil-shaped wing producing, that relies on smooth laminar flow over the wing. The wings are just rotating in a horizontal plane and the lift goes straight up. So the bumblebee's wings are this synchronistic thing, and the wing itself is flexing, and it's creating this chaotic turbulent vortex. And that's how they fly. And of course, bumblebees, they kind of go, oh, really? Well, what do you know? That's what we've been doing all these eons. Okay.
Is that how they move the Easter Island heads?
No.
Turbulence?
No. So every sense that you can think of, your five physical senses, and how you apply them with attention and intent and your concentration and your mental focus, it is capable to use all of those in more extreme and rigorous manners than most people presently do. And doing so, getting really rigorous about your sensation, is the first step in consciousness upgrading. Let me pause here. I'm going to segue, come back to first step in consciousness upgrade. I'm going to segue over here, and I'm going to talk about kind of some of the aspects of consciousness. The first aspect is this sensory input. We bring data in. We have visual sensations, we have acoustic sensations, we have touch sensations, right? Which touch is really multiple senses. It's heat, it's cold, it's pain, it's pressure. There's, half a dozen different types of neural senses, or I'm sorry, neural receptors in our skin, as well as throughout the body, that sense different physical phenomena. The nerve that senses heat, if I hold my hand over this candle, is very different than the nerve that senses pain if I pick up a rock and smash my arm with it. So really, what we loosely group as touch is really at least half a dozen other physical senses, because they're all relying on a different physical input conducted through entirely different nerves to an entirely different region of our brain. Right? So when people ask how many physical senses you actually have, it's not 5. So big red circle with a slash through it, okay? Not 5. And if anybody wants to argue with you about that, send them to me. Me whose ancestors invented that sport called let's entertain the Romans and invite them to dinner.
And you were gonna say troll tossing.
Troll tossing? No, not trolls. They're trivial. No, so we have those physical senses as the inputs. Then that data gets into our central processing unit, or our CPU, and the data gets processed and handled and manipulated, and it undergoes Fourier transforms, which humans have been doing for eons. And it wasn't until the mid-20th century that physicists finally figured out how that worked. Fourier transform and a multiple dimension coordinate transformation, and it's like, I hated that math. Now, I was always really good at math, but Fourier transforms I just didn't like. And I admit it, as a physicist and mathematician, I did not like Fourier transforms.
No clue what you're talking
But somebody out there does. I don't know which one, but somebody does. And they needed to hear that. And then after we've processed that information, we take raw data and convert it into a usable form, then we need an output. What do we do with that information? Somebody walks in and dumps a pile of data on your desk and say, here you go. It's like, what do I do with this? Well, I got to do something with it, right?
File it.
Oh, I had an ingenious method of filing. In one of my jobs where I had about 150 people working for me, I must have had an inch-high stack of paper coming every day. Because this was the computer age that eliminated paperwork. So my stack was only an inch high every day of things I was supposed to read and review and sign and send something back. I didn't have time for an inch-high stack of paperwork. I had a spaceship I was building, right? I had 150 cats I was trying to herd to go build this spaceship on time and to meet this little tiny launch window, right? So I didn't have time for paperwork. So I had my desk, and then I had a 2-drawer file cabinet, and next to that was a 4-drawer file cabinet. And so I put my in basket on the 2-drawer file cabinet, right there next to my desk, and all the paper went in there. And then when the stack of paper on top of the 2-drawer file cabinet got as tall as the 4-drawer file cabinet, then I would deal with it. And the way I would deal with it is, I threw it all away. What usually happened is, after a week or two, when it was about halfway up, somebody came, Harlan, I need that signature back. What on the gizmo thing, you're supposed to approve it. You gave me something? Oh yeah, it was about 4 days ago. It's urgent. Oh, 4 days ago. I go, 1, 2, 3, 4, pulling it. Oh, is this it? Yeah, okay, let me look at it. I'll do it right now, just for you. Sign. Here you go. Rest goes in. So when it came time to get rid of this much paper, I'd take off the last week, set it aside, the rest would get thrown away, and I'd start a new stack. Right? Because I call it my file by pile system. It worked great. Everything that needed to get done got done because somebody came over and told me it needed to get done. The rest of it was just FYI garbage that I was on distribution for that had no relevance to my actual job, which was building a satellite. So anyway, that's just the way I work.
Sheds a lot of light.
And then, let me just say this. Every satellite I designed and built and launched worked perfectly. The first time, every time. Not every company out there gets to say that. I do. So, output. Something has to happen with all that garbage that somebody dumps on your desk. Each of those three major categories can be upgraded. And this is before we even get to the advanced stuff that we Toltecs know with respect to consciousness. So you can train yourself by extending your awareness around you with all your senses all the time, every day. You go out on vacation to a deserted mansion out on the end of a peninsula, and you don't know until you get there that it's haunted, right?
Mhm.
So you decide to leave. Well, when your car's broken down and now won't start, and it's late at night and there's a thunderstorm starting, and you really can't go anywhere because then somebody walks it over and looks down, and the bridge just washed out. You are stuck in a haunted house in the middle of a rainstorm.
Sounds like walking to work.
Almost.
It sounds like a Stephen King movie.
So you decide, okay, I'm going to hunker down, survive the night, and if we survive the night, tomorrow we'll walk out. You're sitting in there, in this mansion with no power. What do you think is going to happen to your senses?
They're gonna increase.
Ring!
Tenfold.
You're going to be sitting there, every creak, every rustle. Is that the wind or is that a ghost?
Mhm.
Is that a mouse? Is it a cat? Did the shutter just bang off, or is that the axe murderer coming in for me, right? Your senses will be so turned up that you're going to hear your heart beating and it's going to scare the heck out of you. Now, hold that picture of your heightened sensory apparatus in your mind and start to do that 24/7.
That's fear.
No. It's heightened senses. Yes, in the case of the, is that an axe murder or a ghost or am I just being paranoid, haunted house story, that was fear that drove you into that heightened state. But the fact that we can get to that heightened state proves that we can get to that heightened state and we can use it. Now turn on that heightened state all the time. And all of a sudden you can hear the fan upstairs, you can hear the car just drove by outside, you can hear the cat walking across the floor. In the old 1970s TV show called Kung Fu, starring David Carradine,
Right.
because he was a white dude pretending to be half Chinese in really bad makeup, because the studio bosses chickened out and didn't hire Bruce Lee out of racial concerns. He was already cast, and then they cut him. Could you imagine how good that show would have been? Not that David Carradine was bad. I think he did a great job. But Bruce Lee, oh my gosh, that would have been phenomenal. But anyway, the story is an American sailor's in China, meets a Chinese woman, they have a baby, he goes home, she dies, and there's this half white, half Chinese orphan, and he's looked upon unfavorably by most of Chinese culture. So he hangs out waiting at the door of the monastery, waiting for the one time each year they take in students. He's got nowhere else to go. He's got no family. He's got nothing, right? Nobody likes him. And so, long story short, he gets accepted. And one of the first things he meets, the first people he meets after he's accepted into the monastery, is this ancient old monk who is blind. And the ancient monk starts talking to him when he's just, the little kid's just walking by. It's like, how do you know I'm here? Well, I heard you walking by. And you don't walk like anyone else here. Therefore, you're the new kid. And then as they talk, and the kid goes back to sweeping, which is what he'd been assigned to do, the old monk says something to the effect of, watch out for the grasshopper. Right? Looks down and says, how did you know that was it? Well, I heard it. He says, oh man, how is it that you hear the grasshopper? And he says, young man, how is it that you do not? So by the time he grows up, and he's probably in his early mid-20s, he leaves the monastery, and at that time the old guy asks him, well, what do you hear? I hear the grasshopper. He's trained his senses. He can hear the grasshopper walking along. So that's step one of training our consciousness, is to hone our senses. Step two is to hone our processing. Water.
Say that again. Hone what and what?
Hone our processing. Now, our mind has, our brain has two halves, a left hemisphere and a right hemisphere. Left and right. What? One side of our brain is the linear, logical, mathematical side. This is the side that basically says, the deer I need to kill for food to feed my family is running away. I need to throw right there with my spear to kill it. Linear. Velocity times time equals distance. Even when they didn't know the equation, they knew that. If the deer is running and it's right there and I throw right there, you miss every time. They learned that one quickly. We also have the abstract side, the artistic, creative side. The touchy-feely, fuzzy subject side for those of us who were math science geeks. If it wasn't measurable, it was in the official category of the fuzzy subjects that didn't have hard, fast answers. It had qualitative answers like, which color do you like best? You know, Well, it depends on what part of my spacecraft will overheat, and I want to reject heat, so I put a white thing on it, or which part do I want to heat up using natural sunlight, so I paint it black so it absorbs heat. Then I'll either like black or white best. What do you mean there's something in between, right? For those of us who are math geeks, learning the artistic side is hard. For those who are artistic people, learning math and science and equations is hard. Do it anyway. Whichever side you're on, you got to do it anyway. I now produce my own artwork sometimes when I have enough time to tinker with it. 10 years ago, I couldn't have. I'm upgrading consciously and deliberately by forcing myself into what I call that zone of discomfort. You can't improve your capabilities in math or art or martial arts and remain comfortable. You can't upgrade your consciousness and become all that you are intended to be and remain comfortable. Sorry to break the news to you, but those of you who are artistic types really and truly, and I mean this, need to learn chess or mahjong, some kind of strategy game that forces you to think ahead and forces a new level of rigor into that little brain of yours.
Why would you assume that somebody who's right-brained and isn't thinking 8 or 9 steps ahead?
You are, probably more, but you're not thinking in the same linear fashion that it's needed to fully develop the left side, the mental side of the brain. Yeah, you want to plan an art project. I've seen your work. I've seen the way you put together theatrical productions. You're thinking 20 steps ahead, but in a very right-brained manner. So there's left brain skills, there's right brain skills, and we each need to force ourselves into a zone of discomfort where we're learning and getting better at that which is not our natural tendency. That's a very powerful method of upgrading your processing. If you are good at art and you keep doing art, you should be doing art because that's part of your calling. But if you never do anything else, you're never going to develop the other skills that you need to have for upgrading a balanced consciousness. Think of this as the dreamer, the stalker, and the warrior. The warrior side is that more linear, that as you face the tree of life, it's that descending male pillar. That's that mental energy. It goes through the sphere of Hod, and that's the skill that a lot of dreamers need to develop. For those of us for whom that was natural, going over and developing the other pillars was hard. Mainly because it was a long time before I even knew that I needed to do that. When I was studying for the acupuncture board exams some almost 20 years ago, the first time I took it, I didn't pass. I missed by 1 point. And then I was working with some people I knew of how do I get better at this? And finally one said, oh, that's what you're trying to get good at. Oh, well, that's just right brain. We just need to wake up your right brain. I'm like, huh? What's a right brain? So we did stuff to wake up my right brain. I took the exam the second time, passed it with flying colors because now I had a right brain that was starting to wake up. Because Oriental medicine, traditional Oriental medicine, is not linear, rigorous science. It's qualitative. That was my start at waking up my right brain. That was the first time I'd ever had to do that. Ever. I was over 40 at that time. I've read this about 40. Now the outputs, step 3 of upgrading your outputs. Just do something new. This is on the first level of upgrading consciousness, is do something you've never done before. Go places you've never been. Go to a museum exhibit that in theory you have absolutely no interest in. Go hear a music concert of a genre of music that you apparently have no interest in because you've never been to that genre of music before, and go hear new music. You don't like theater? Go see a play. Learn a new skill. Take up fly fishing and tie your own flies. Why would I want to do that? I don't even like fishing. Do it anyway. Learn to row a boat. If you've never been in a rowboat and never handled oars and made the boat move without tipping over, go learn it. It doesn't matter. These are just examples of new things to do. They're outputs. And at each step of the way, you're using your increased sensory apparatus, you're using your increased processing skills, and you're doing something new. If you're a left-brain rocket scientist, learn art. Make a picture good enough to publish on the cover of a book. So that's all based on using skills and abilities that you know you have, like hearing and seeing, but to do so at a much higher level of rigor than you've ever thought possible. The analogy being martial artists. Do things with the same physical bodies that we have, only they do it at a level of rigor and expertise that the average human will never be able to duplicate, because the average human doesn't have the discipline. When I was teaching karate, 80% of the people who came in for their first month of lessons never made it past the 3-month point. I'd say 50% never made it past the 1-month point. It wasn't for them. It was too hard. It was too rigorous. It pushed them in ways that made them uncomfortable. Right? Whether it was sore muscles, or whether it was the temptations of, oh, just skip your class today, come out for a drink. You know, they never made it. For the 3 of us that were running a karate school for a number of years down in Southern California, for each person that we trained up to black belt, there were probably 40 who started, would be my estimate. It's hard. Now then, the next major category of upgrading your consciousness has to do with skills and abilities you don't know you have.
Mm.
The human organism has skills and abilities that we don't know we have because the vast majority of modern culture does not train our youth in an awareness that these skills and abilities exist. There's at least two reasons why that might be the case. One is that the people doing the training may not know they exist because the knowledge has been lost to time or deliberately hidden from time. Mm-hmm. And that deliberately withholding knowledge is a second reason why it may happen. And I know that it has happened that way at times in our history. But likewise, there are times in our history when these skills and abilities that most of us don't know exist, it was more common knowledge. There are times in our past where it was common knowledge that what we would now call ESP or telepathy was used in practice with great regularity. What we call ESP is largely a function of our higher bodies. So if you know that higher bodies exist, and if your society trains their culture in the use of them, then the natural abilities of the higher bodies get honed and refined from an early age. And all of a sudden, then we're doing the mental equivalent of Nolan Ryan throwing a 100-mile-an-hour fastball when the best I could probably generate is 75. 75 miles an hour does not get you into the Baseball Hall of Fame. Let's just put it that way. 100 miles an hour does. That's why Nolan Ryan is in the Hall of Fame. So if we know from looking at ancient artwork that people are drawing auras and chakras and the higher bodies, we read the scriptures and the texts of these ancient cultures that produced that artwork, and we find out, oh, they were using the higher bodies and the higher body capabilities. Artwork is crucial because it passes on information that otherwise would have been forgotten. Whether it's a picture or whether it's a sculpture or any other piece of artwork. We have the ability to gain knowledge from these ancient cultures that is otherwise lost to time. Artwork is the primary means by which, other than oral transmission, by which the Toltecs passed on information. Historians lament the fact that the Toltecs had no written language. As they stand in front of giant frescoes in Teotihuacan that has the whole story right there. And they just write off, oh, decorative artwork.
It's a picture language.
It goes beyond that. It's far more sophisticated. It's into the world of symbolism. And symbols are the human attempt to bring into our three-dimensional physical reality knowledge from the higher planes. It can't really be put into words. It's feeling, it's emotion. We have to engage with the symbols and that higher knowledge with our own higher bodies.
And the energy.
I was getting there. Ding, ding, ding. You're jumping ahead. Both of you are tonight. Symbolism. Everybody knows about the Dan Brown novels like The Da Vinci Code, and he's big on revealing the ancient secrets and all that, right? Well, his character, the guy, the one that was played by Tom Hanks in The Da Vinci Code, Landon, the character's name is Landon, is an art historian who specializes in symbolism.
Mm-hmm.
And his explanations, when you watch the movie The Da Vinci Code, his explanations are all very three-dimensional, linear. He's a pure academician. And yet as he goes through being chased and all the people trying to kill him that happen in the Da Vinci Code movie, he keeps lamenting the fact that it takes him so long to figure out certain things. Right? Oh, how could I have been so dense? Because you weren't using your whole brain, you ding dong. You know, is what I wanted to tell him. Symbolism is a multidimensional language that cannot be explained by three-dimensional tools. It is the language, it is the best we can do to put into this plane the language of the higher planes, the concepts and information. So developing our latent abilities that are associated with our higher bodies is one of the keys, that second layer, if you will, on the cake of consciousness upgrade that most people never even begin. Because most people spend lifetimes, their whole lifetime, multiple lifetimes, denying the existence of their own nature. They don't have an etheric body. I don't have an astral body. Oh, that's just bunk. No, you're not seeing auras. No, you're not communicating with someone 100 miles away instantly without a phone. Technically, cell phones don't communicate instantly. There's a time lag that can be measured.
Mm-hmm. It's like when you think, say, I think of you, and then I know it's you when the phone rings.
Yeah, there's a documented phenomenon that's referred to as the twins phenomenon. And it's particularly strong between genetically identical twins. And they can be literally on opposite sides of the world, and they'll have the same thought at literally the same moment. They've looked at the time down to the second, the same exact time. One of them gets hurt and the other instantly knows it. I actually witnessed that once when I was growing up, because we knew some kids in town went to the same school that were identical twins. and one of them got hurt at school, and the other instantly knew it and told his mom, we have to go get the other one, he just got hurt. They got in their car and drove to the school, and before the people at the school could even get to the office and call the mother, come get your son, he's hurt, they were already there because of the twins phenomenon. We have these latent capabilities, and in order to develop them, you have to get outside your comfort zone. You have to get into the zone of discomfort. And you have to stop listening to the propaganda from mainstream media or the various power control authorities of our culture, like some organized religions, like the government, like academia, that these things don't exist. When you develop these latent capabilities and then you go look for yourself, you go, oh, that's what everybody's been talking about. And it becomes the process we all went through for those of us who ever learned to ride a bicycle. It's the process we went through to learn to ride a bike. We watched other kids riding bikes, telling us how fun it was and what the process was like. And you turn the pedals and you steer and you lean, you do this stuff and you ride a bike. And we've never ridden a bike, so we take their word for it. Oh, it's possible, other people are doing it, but I tried to get on a bicycle once and instantly fell over and scraped my knee. It hurt. That was my zone of discomfort. I'm not going to learn to ride a bike. It's dangerous. But for those of us who pursued through broken bones and smashed faces, that's why I'm so attractive. I fell off a bike when I was a kid, and I broke my arm and smashed my face and had a concussion.
Oh,
And
my goodness.
what you see here is the result of that. I wasn't born this good. I had to go smash my face against the concrete and embed gravel all over it
Ouch.
to get this good looking.
Thousands of years of barbarian interbreeding had nothing to do with it.
Why would you assume it was inbreeding? All the places my ancestors conquered, all the wenches we drug back home, and you're assuming it was inbreeding? Come on. All the multiple wives, I mean, come on, there was a lot of cross-pollination there in my family tree. Inbreeding, indeed.
Good time to come in, kitty.
Smoky Cat, come here. Come over here and get on TV. It's live YouTube internet TV. Not every cat gets to do that. Switch cameras. We got her in there?
Mm-hmm.
There, that's Smokey. She's our Jaguar kitty. All right. So, maximum development of skills that already exist that you know are there, but you've got to push yourself. Coupled with developing skills and talents you really didn't know you had, forms the basis of upgrading our consciousness. Doing things that in history were actually commonplace. Right at the time where continents blew up and people lost their jobs over that, and whole supermarket chains disappeared overnight. In a very short period of time, we went from having a highly sophisticated, technologically advanced civilization to back to having to learn to throw spears and lead the deer in order to have something to eat. And what society has today is what we've been able to reassemble from the ashes and the scraps and the fragments of that ancient civilization. And we are not yet back to where we were just before that civilization started to fall. We've got a ways to go. And the hope is this consciousness work that we do will have enough of an effect on the world and a big enough piece of the population that we will succeed and get back to that point and then be able to go up without going back down. We are at the end of one great age and the start of another. Great ages on this planet are defined as approximately 26,000 years, which is not a random number. It's the exact amount of time it takes our solar system to orbit our galaxy once.
Say that again, please.
It is the time it takes our solar system to orbit our galaxy one time. And as we do, we go through different regions of space where the conditions of the three-dimensional space we're passing through change. And so every 26,000 years, we go through this region we're passing through now. And the radiations from our galactic center and the radiations from our galactic neighbors cause a heightening and an increase in frequencies, making great change possible. That is one of the reasons why the planet Earth is so crucial right now. Because once we pass through this, which is expected to take 1,000 years or more, depending on whose theory you like, it's going to take us, when that 1,000 years end, it's going to take another 25,000 years to get back to this point again. That's why this time is so crucial for humanity. That's why this time, this place, this planet, there's a waiting list for souls to get in here. Not everybody got to be here on this planet at this time to participate in this great change and upscaling of humanity. Part of what we who have this consciousness ability and knowledge are trying to do is break down these self-imposed limits that our society and our culture has spent a really long time building up, to get rid of these world is flat-isms, which makes it so ironic that one of the dark side agendas has been to resurrect the whole flat earth theory. And there's a small percentage of the population that's buying it.
I saw another flyer on it too.
Yeah.
I'll have to send you the picture.
I like that one, and I've posted it quite a few times. It shows a picture of the full moon, and superimposed on it is a black bar going right through the middle of the moon. And the caption reads, "Those flat earth eclipses are awesome." One day, I will actually maybe walk through all the evidence that proves the planet we're sitting on is round. Technically, it's an oblate spheroid. meaning the southern hemisphere is slightly more bulbous than the northern one, and that we're not sitting on a flat disk.
It's kind of like, trying to describe God to an atheist.
Right.
Don't waste your breath.
I know. So there's actually already exist books that go through this evidence, history of science. Here's what we did. Way back, somewhere between 400 and 200 BC-ish, there was a Greek philosopher by the name of Eratosthenes. Those Greek words are sometimes hard to pronounce. Who was living in Egypt. This was the Ptolemaic era, I guess, where Alexander the Great had conquered Egypt. This was before the Romans went in and conquered Egypt. I mean, Egypt for thousands of years was like, they were it, right? And all of a sudden, everybody started conquering them. Well, at least the Greeks and the Romans. And anyway, he figured out the whole thing. The Earth is round, it rotates on its axis. He figured out where the equator was. He went a measured distance north. He built 2 obelisks of the exact same height. One so at noon on the equator there was no shadow cast. And then he went over here, he measured the shadow that was cast, and he did all the geometry triangulation, and he calculated within a very, very narrow limit, well better than the limit of the instruments he had to work with should have allowed him to calculate. He calculated the exact diameter of the Earth and the distance to the sun.
That's amazing.
And that's one of the fragments that survived the burning of the libraries of Alexandria in Egypt. And that's how we happen to know that little factoid. And he was right. He just didn't have the theory. He put it into practice, and he was right.
He pushed the limits.
He pushed the limits. He got out of somebody's zone of discomfort, zone of comfort into the zone of discomfort.
And he wasn't burned at the stake for it.
And he wasn't burned at the stake that I know of. I don't remember how he died. I only remember his story because he measured the diameter of the Earth and the distance to the sun. And he had the correct model of the heliocentric solar system. So that's what consciousness is. That's how we use it. That's what we're trying to do. Is we're trying to help humanity make a quantum leap by stripping away all that is false. For those of you who follow me on Facebook, either my personal site or the Golden Eagle Discourses site, you may have stumbled upon my Facebook group called What We Know. What we know, the theory is, what if what we think we know isn't what we really know? What if in every field of human endeavor there was advanced knowledge that somebody knows that isn't part of the mainstream knowledge, limited knowledge, that's being taught to the masses? Whether it's history or archaeology or science or medicine or art, we have the ability right now to completely revolutionize life on this planet and be living in a near utopia. We don't need any other single invention. You want free, clean energy? We got it. There's over 200 patents have been issued in this country alone on so-called free energy, meaning they're extracting energy from the quantum field in one way or the other and using it. And the dogmatic academia mantra is, oh, that's a perpetual motion machine, and we've proven perpetual motion can't happen. Well, it depends. If you're defining the universe as this little box here, and you're ignoring the other 99% of the universe, then yeah, the concept of perpetual motion seems odd at best and illegal at worst.
What about the big pendulum thing, like in Washington and stuff?
Well, the Foucault pendulum at the Smithsonian will eventually run down. You know?
I was thinking it was gravity.
Well, yeah, gravity and air friction will eventually slow it down and it would stop. So periodically they've got to bring it back and let it start again. I loved that when our family visited the Smithsonian Institute. That's in the National Museum of History and Natural Science, or whatever that one was called. And it's like 100-foot tall Foucault pendulum. And it goes back and forth in the same plane while the Earth rotates under it. And it's every 15 minutes throughout the day. They have these little pillars about 6 inches tall on little hinges set up. And as the pendulum comes to move, it starts to tick this thing until eventually it knocks it over. And 15 minutes later, the pendulum's moved again and it knocks it over, right? It's one of the pieces of data that can be used to show that the Earth is round and it's rotating on its axis, and the laws,
It's
Newton's
flat.
laws.
Come on.
What?
It's flat. Come on.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I gotcha. One of my favorite things, which I know I've posted, I've downloaded it, about the flat Earth is somebody took a snapshot of a Facebook post by the Flat Earth Society. And the post reads, "The Flat Earth Society has members all around the globe." I kid you not. I have a copy in that computer right there. So,
Not
yeah.
all flat or
all around the globe. The globe. And I have another one where the Flat Earth Society acknowledges that every planet in the solar system, including the sun, is round and globe and spherical. But the Earth, for some reason, isn't, because we just don't quite have enough evidence to that effect. It's out of their mouths, not mine. I'm just relaying the stupidity, the information. So consciousness itself is under attack right now in more ways than we can count. These are the dying attempts of an old system, an old world that's on life support. And so what needs to happen is the illusion has to come down. And as we look around what's gone on in this world since about 2012-ish, when nothing happened, is power structures right and left are being exposed. Whether it's the Catholic Church, the US government, the pedophile activities, the human trafficking, the cover-up of free energy.
Skinheads.
Yeah, everything. Some of what's going on right now is actually understood if you apply holistic healing principles from an individual to the humanity organism as a whole. In holistic health, we talk about suppression versus elimination of a symptom. Suppression means we cover it up and force it down. It's like sweeping the dirt under the rug and pretending it isn't there. It's going to come out at some point. Elimination means you treat the root cause, you get rid of the original source of imbalance, allow the body to heal, and then you have a new, higher, vibrant level of health. Well, from the humanity organism, we went through, supposedly, from about 1945 on, this great social awakening that talked about, oh, racism is bad, let's get rid of racism, and Nazism is bad, and fascism and communism are bad, so let's get rid of all that. And now what we see is we didn't get rid of it, we just suppressed it, we swept it under the table, but we didn't fix the true root cause, which was an incomplete understanding and an incomplete educational system to talk about true human history and true human nature. If I truly understand that you and I are one, that we're like two fingers coming up through different holes in the matrix, right? That we are connected via that oneness of the universe. That we are like two buckets of salt water scooped out of the same ocean. Well, we scoop it out, now we don't call it the ocean anymore, we call it salt water. But a second ago was ocean, and when we're done with it, whether we dump it back in the ocean or dump it back on the ground and it runs to the ocean, it will recombine with the ocean. And it's still just the ocean. In fact, these whole human forms are just bags of ocean that learned how to get cleverly walk on land. The human form is roughly 70 to 75%, depending on whose physiology textbook you want to believe this week. We are 70 to 75% saltwater with exactly the salinity of the ocean. And we conspired to grow a bag to take our salt water for a walk on dry land.
Damn those amoebas.
You know, I go back right to amoeba. They learn to move. Cells learn to move. And every capability that we have as a human organism comes down to the capability of a cell. We move an arm, it's because a cell can move. We sense, it's because a cell can sense. We process data, it's because at least somewhere one cell can process data. And of course, all of that biological and evolution stuff that is taught as science completely overlooks the 80 to 90% of the universe that's not the physical plane. It's the higher planes. Just like our organism is mostly not this physical body. It's our higher bodies, the bodies of light, the etheric, astral, etc. So consciousness, the next layer up, the third layer, isn't just us and our capabilities. It's learning to interface with and accept the fact that our consciousness is but an extension of the innate consciousness of the universe. And with the Akadu energy, that unity uttermost shown that emerges within us as that innermost light is our direct connection to Source. And we therefore can tap into that higher level consciousness at will. We just have to intend it. So if you think of consciousness as a three-layer cake, there's the physical senses, there's our higher senses, and then there's the consciousness of the universe, all of which are manifest in us right now for the purpose of helping humanity advance and stripping away the illusions of the world getting rid of the limits, whether it's free energy or levitating hovercraft Jetsons cars. That's the one I want. And we could have it right now because it exists. The military stole Tesla's rediscovery of the ancient inventions, and they're using them. And we could have it right now. But not unless we change the consciousness of humanity. The world and humanity could be extraordinarily different right now. It just takes that little shift in consciousness. We have to embrace the idea that we too can hear the grasshopper. Any questions?
So can we challenge ourselves with intention to raise our consciousness for input and output of senses?
I hope you do.
But I mean, more so now.
You mean, do we have the capability to do that?
Well, to use the Katawa to do that. You know.
Well, the short answer is yes. Most people won't because they've gotten used to being comfortable. We see a lot of people come to this work, this Toltec work, and some of them don't last long. And it mostly revolves around this concept that they want to stay comfortable. I've had people leave this school because they wanted to stay comfortable. I've witnessed with my own eyes people leaving Coyote school because they want to be comfortable. They want to stay comfortable. I even have heard it come out of their mouth, oh no, I just need to stay comfortable. I have to be comfortable. And he very patiently tells people, okay, if you want to grow, you want to expand, you want these new abilities, you want to maximize your ability to do what you're really here to do, you have to push yourself. You have to push beyond where you're comfortable into where you're not. Very patiently and lovingly explains that, and they still ran away screaming because they had to stay comfortable. So yes, you can do that. Most people won't. That's why most people need a teacher to sit them down and get in their face and say, why aren't you doing this? Stop it. Stop the excuses and do what you said you were going to do. Because any teacher we aren't running around the streets of Mount Shasta or Riverside or anywhere else and randomly grabbing people on the street and dragging them in and sitting them down and saying, you're going to be a Toltec student and you're going to not be comfortable and I'm going to make you do it. I mean, we're kind of sort of still human. I mean, I kind of would like to be comfortable. I would love to live in a world where I could be comfortable. We just don't live in that world. So, like Coyote, my teacher said, when the student is tricked into following the path, the teacher is obligated to teach. So I'm obligated to teach those of you who show up and say, teach me, I want this. Mm-hmm. I'm not teaching anybody except the people who've said they want it. Now, I'll go teach a Kadwa and teach people consciousness and teach people healing. But this hard stuff, the Toltec path, the fullness of the Toltec path, you have to ask for it. And so once you've asked for it, you're going to get it. And that's what I will do. That's what I'm obligated to do. So yeah, you can do it, and I hope you do. And most people need that swift kick in the butt with the sharp-toed boot.
I have a question. So,
Yeah.
like, okay, my weak subject is math
Mhm.
because of the school system and
Right. The whole girls
and
can't do math thing.
right. And so, I mean, I suck at math. So
Stop it. What did you just say?
I suck at math.
Stop saying that.
Okay,
Say, I'm not good at math yet.
I am not good at math yet. So let's just use math. So how's a good approach to learn how to use math with that, you know, especially for females?
Or anyone who's right brain
Yeah.
dominant. There's two things. Actually, probably a lot more. But the first two that comes to mind is the book that Bonnie used to master algebra. It's called
Mathematical palette.
That's what it was called?
Yeah.
It wasn't called Algebra for Right Brain People or something?
No.
Okay. The Mathematical Palette.
Yeah.
Okay. Write that down. The Mathematical Palette. Anything lower than algebra is arithmetic. That's basically counting to 10. I know you can do that. Then you go into algebra and geometry, which are parallel paths. Neither is a prerequisite for the other. They both will help. But learn geometry and learn the mathematical palette way of algebra. Study that. Give yourself the assignment that you're going to learn those subjects as if it was a college course. So over a course of a quarter or a trimester, 3 to 4 months, sit down and go through that book. Now, geometry, there's 2 or 3 books I can recommend that talk about sacred geometry. Standard Euclidean geometry, like they taught us in high school, is boring. You have this much whatevers and put a swimming pool and make it like this and blah, blah, blah. And what's the area? Okay, well, you got to draw angles and similar triangles and all this stuff, right? It's like, what's the application? So given the nature of the work that we do in this school, that general field of sacred geometry is a lot more interesting and pertinent. It will start teaching you symbolism, the language of the higher planes. Talk to me after we're done with the broadcast, because I have the books, I just don't remember the long titles.
Okay, thank you.
That would be one way. The other way, and I'm serious, is start learning chess. That combines geometry and strategy and math. And it's a practical application, and it's something new, and it's going to put you in your zone of discomfort until you get good enough that you don't suck. You don't ever have to be as good as a grandmaster. I'm pretty darn good at chess, but I'm not a grandmaster. Yet. Mainly because I haven't devoted the time to mastering every combination. Memory work is another way, right? Memorize poetry or memorize sacred scriptures. Pick one. Pick a spiritual tradition. Memorize scriptures. When I was at the event this last week, Saturday, what's today? Monday. That was 2 days ago.
Monday.
Today's Monday. Hail Moon. Last Saturday, Hail Saturn, we were promoting the Akadwa down at a holistic fair in Reading. And I don't think you or anybody else was there. There was one of the women who came by the booth and was looking for something. And somehow it morphed into a conversation about her life path. And so she asked me questions about my life path. And
I was there.
oh, you were there for that part where I recited
Yeah.
the poem?
Oh, I think I missed that part.
Okay, no. I mentioned in passing that I had always been doing, not following, I thought, don't follow the masses if you want to break new ground. Something to that effect. And so I mentioned in passing that Robert Frost's poem, The Road Not Taken, is what was one of my guidelines all my life, and has been and still is. She says, oh, I need to go look that up and read it again. And so I recited it for her, the whole thing. And she was amazed that I knew the whole thing right then and there on the spot. And she still said she was going to go home and read it. And it seemed to resonate with her. Because the last two lines of the poem really are the take-home message. And he walks through the story. The last two lines of the poem: two roads diverged in the wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Do you have a question?
I was just going to mention earlier, you know, as far as getting out of your comfort zone is the idea of memorizing something. It doesn't matter what it is, you know. But think about even some of the basic lines from the ABD. You know, what kind of thing is going to be helpful to you, that's important to you, that you may have a chance to actually use it sometime, that you feel would be a good thing to have memorized. And I think memorization is something we don't give ourselves credit for. Oh, I can't do that. That's much too hard. And yet we memorize songs and poetry and all sorts of things that have a rhythm to it. So, you know, we're certainly capable of it.
That's a really good idea. We could take poetry and set it to music and then memorize it.
That's why
Wow, what a great invention we just came up with.
That's why rap was invented to help the Oakland school kids.
No, that's wrong.
Oh, well, that's what I heard.
Rap existed way back in the 1930s. James Taylor in the 1960s was doing rap. He's a white dude.
But I think that's a different point. The point is that they started using it as a method of helping kids.
That may be true,
Yeah.
but they didn't invent it. That's my point. It's ancient by today's. It's almost 100 years old. Go listen to James Taylor's Traffic Jam. And you tell me if that's not rap. So the comfort zone, memorization, it could be plays. Look at actors and actresses,
Right.
especially in theater.
Mm-hmm.
Not so much movies and TV, where they get to do multiple takes. Now say the line like this. No, you're live on stage. This is why I have so much respect for theater. One of many reasons. Theater done well.
Mm-hmm.
We've all seen theater done less than well. Shakespeare, right? Shakespearean actors. Some of the best actors in the world got their training in Shakespeare.
Mm-hmm.
James Earl Jones, before he even did his Darth Vader role.
Right. It way, way before, right? James Earl Jones, phenomenal. He did Shakespeare. I don't remember the role he first did. This was when there was still overt racism going on. And it was the one where he wears the mask.
Caliban from The Tempest.
Yeah. And he finally talked to the director because it was clear he was the best actor. He says, look, the whole play I'm wearing a mask. Nobody's going to know I'm black. So he cast him. And he did so well that then he actually got cast as Othello. A black dude. Imagine casting a black guy to play a black guy. Ugh. Racism gets me really torqued off.
His eyes are bulging.
I know.
No, I get mad at people because of their behavior.
Right.
I don't give a rat's hind end what color your skin is.
Mhm.
So, upgrade our consciousness. Push your head. Go memorize something. I don't care. ABD. We're all going to need that one at some point.
And that training is for us more than it is for those in transition.
Now, I am experiencing the clear light of objective reality. Right? Nothing is happening. Nothing ever has happened or ever will happen. So memorize it. Memorize it. Learn a play, learn scriptures, learn poetry, whatever. Learn songs, which are nothing but poetry set to music. Learn to play a musical instrument. Again, you don't have to be good enough to perform at Carnegie Hall. That's not the intent unless you want it to be. If you decide, you know what, I got to get good enough to play at Carnegie Hall, then do it. Otherwise, the intent is development of your consciousness. Music in particular isn't just a right-brained activity. It's actually very mathematical. What music does better than anything I'm aware of is it links the two hemispheres of the brain more strongly. Okay, any more questions online?
So Maria had asked a question earlier. She said it wasn't relevant to the conversation. So basically she asked, how do you remove a curse or spell from another person? Is there a preferred Toltec method? And I asked her if that was, are they aware of your involvement? She said, well, this is a hypothetical situation, so let's say that yes, we're going to assume that they're aware of the involvement.
There are multiple ways of doing that. And you have to become proficient at working the higher planes and controlling entities that dwell there. And that's probably all I will say in this forum. So if this is a specific issue, then let's set up a time to talk.
Mohaddeep says that she likes geometry, that was fun, and she was good at it.
Good.
And Maria asks, how do you know if you, let me read it. How do you know when you don't suck at chess?
When you sit down and play someone better than you, and they don't defeat you in 4 moves or less. When your queen survives more than 10 moves, then you don't suck at chess.
Based off of that, I don't suck at chess.
Yay! Ding, ding, ding.
So,
when you can actually beat someone legitimately and fairly, then for sure you don't suck at chess.
So can we come over and play chess with you if you teach us?
Anytime you want.
Yeah, and if you suck really bad, you have to play Stellan first.
In the book, the series, the Dune series, and it was portrayed very well in the Sci-Fi Channel's miniseries on Dune. The people who were foolish enough to challenge Muad'Dib in man-to-man, one-on-one combat, thinking if I kill the prophet, then I'm going to be king, right? There came a time when they weren't allowed to challenge him unless they could defeat his woman. And she, of course, had been trained by Muad'Dib, and she was raised Fremen, so she was outstanding in combat. And those kind of formal ritual combats weren't done with swords or blasters and the other hand. It was with a knife. Probably about this size, maybe the blades weren't quite this long, and it was made from the tooth of a sandworm. You have to read the series or watch the show to know what that is. And so she started just killing these people who came to challenge him. And he's like, what's going on? And he came to challenge me and said he wasn't worthy of you. You know? And then word started spread that if you really wanted to challenge Muad'Dib, you're going to have to defeat his woman, in which case, even if you did, he was going to be really ticked off that you just killed his woman, and challenges stopped.
I thought it was interesting that Douglas Truth posted today, people forget that the spice must flow.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like that.
Good for you, Douglas, if you're watching.
So
That is the whole concept of the Dune series. The spice must flow. The spice is what makes the universe go round. It's an analogy for energy, and it's an analogy for the sacred mushroom, which is required if you want to develop maximum abilities in the higher planes. It stimulates development.
In the Dune series?
No, I'm talking about the mushroom here.
Oh, so.
Every
okay.
shamanic culture uses something that will do that. And the whole Dune series, which is why it's on the recommended reading list, is based, it's a very shamanic culture with this sci-fi overlay to make it really interesting. Brilliant work by Frank Herbert. My hat's off, sir. He's no longer alive, I don't think, but nevertheless, it was brilliant.
I have a question on sacred geometry. It's a little bit off.
Okay.
But what are the how do you say it? The fractals that.
Fractals.
Yeah, the fractals that I'm seeing. What are those?
Good question. What you're seeing are the waveforms, which are a portion of the background energy field of the universe, which is utter, pure, total chaos, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've filtered that down through our assemblage point to this, and when we start seeing behind this illusion, it's the equivalent of being on Star Trek, and when they're on the holodeck, and there's a power glitch, and they drop the holographic projection in spots, and they see the grid of the holodeck structure behind that. You're kind of seeing that. Those are, think of them as a cross section of a wave. And there's a lot of similarities in the shapes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you see that, a lot of them look like paisleys, you know, like on the fabric,
Mm-hmm.
which is from India, right? We got paisley fabric from India. And that tells me that in India, they've been recording this. This is more of the art, right? That records the higher plane knowledge. Because that's what that looks like. Some of them might look like overlaid feathers, but it's a subset of those waveforms, or a slice through a waveform. And it's all part of this background structure of the universe. That's what you're seeing.
Yeah, I'm seeing all the different levels.
You'll see different colors.
And different
You'll see
colors.
different patterns, which are different frequencies
Right.
that you're tapping into, each one of which can be thought of as a space or a chamber.
Yeah, and there's dimensions too.
Yeah. And you can be looking at this room and have the whole thing fade away into those waveforms. This is what was portrayed in the original Matrix movie, right at the end, when Neo stops seeing the projection in the Matrix and starts seeing the code. All the ones and zeros over here, and they form an outline of a person, wherever. He's seeing the code, right? He's seeing past the illusion. One of several reasons why I like the first Matrix movie, and the other two that come after it suck. For other reasons, which I won't go into.
It seems like it's also, a bit of the hologram, because the fractals are always the same as the whole. They're just smaller and they're,
Yeah,
folded.
kind of. In chaos theory, there is a branch of science called chaos. Not the generic use of the term, but this very specific scientific field of study that we call chaos theory.
Not get smart. Chaos.
No. It arose out of fringe research in multiple fields of study. It rose out of meteorology, it rose out of math, it rose out of mapping, what's that called? Cartography. It rose out of the fringes of physics. And multiple people over a 10, 15, 20-year period of time were finding things that didn't fit. And they couldn't get published because, well, it's clearly not math, it's clearly not meteorology, it's clearly not physics or chemistry or any other established academic field. So go away, you're chasing phantoms. And then something happened called the internet, which gave people the ability to publish and get information out to wide numbers of people instantly at relatively low cost. It's all electronic. And boom, instantly your web page is visible to other people everywhere, and they started talking. And they realized they all got together and they had a whole brand new field of science that is called chaos theory. And what it showed, among many things, is that there are these repeating patterns that no two times through this process is anything exactly the same. But there are generalities that are repeatable. And when done correctly, chaos theory allows us to predict what random things are going to happen. There's a wonderful book called Chaos, The Making of a New Science. The author's name Glick or Glickman, I can't remember. Which goes through that whole history. And it's still the best introductory book on chaos theory I know, because it talks about the history. It's a wonderful story.
Can I get the title of that book again, please?
I think it is called Chaos, The Making of a New Science. It's in the library. We can look, along with the other two books you're supposed to remind me about when we're done. Something about geometry? Yeah. So that's the what you're seeing.
Thank you.
It's available as a PDF.
Oh, it is?
Mm-hmm.
There you go. Any other questions?
It's Glick.
Glick.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I thought it was, but then Glickman is a name of an different author for something else that I probably am aware of.
Nothing else tonight.
And I actually used to work with a guy named Glickman. Come to think of it. Any other questions? Okay, we're going to stop here. Thank you. And we'll see you next week, if not before.
Thank
you. Do good, avoid evil, everybody.
Thank you.